democracy. And well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the event this morning, I think that one of the good ideas that we have made with this event is that we have seen democracy in different angles. It has been a privilege to have President Calderon here talking about his direct experience with government, organized crime, and his ideas about the future. Also, people from the constitutional law talking about building judiciary. Also, social scientists talking about democracy and the problem of organized crimes in democracy. And, well, different point of view, different topics, different people. And we're going to close this event with Professor David Walsh. Professor David Walsh is a professor from the Catholic University of America here in Washington. It's a leading voice in contemporary political philosophy. For us, it's an honor to have him here. And I have some question in order to try to finish this debate about democracy from the light perspective of political philosophy, which we keep the lighter for the end. And in my case, I have had the honor to, in the last year, to have many conversations for a project with many thinkers and different political philosophers and people from different countries. For example, Rémy Braguet from France, Peter Kreeft from the United States, Gregory Puknik, Fernando Sabater, and David Walsh, among many others. And I have been doing these conversations about democracy and the crisis of democracy. And when I ask many of them about their view and their feeling about what people is talking about the crisis of democracy currently, all of them start to talk with a lot of concern about the future of democracy. All of them, but not was the case of David Walsh. He said, listen, democracy is crisis. Democracy is a permanent crisis, and I don't see anything to be worried about beyond what we have lived in the history of political democracy. So I would like to start, Professor Walsh, for that particular perspective of view about democracy and this public debate about the democracy and crisis right now.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here. I do come to Georgetown occasionally, but I almost never meet my fellow political scientists, just the political theorists, a smaller club. But at any rate, it's nice and it's wonderful to have people from Latin America and from elsewhere in the world, and although I am a political theorist, I do believe strongly in the empirical side of politics. Like Aristotle, I believe that we should study what actually happens and not just think about it. Thank you for the lovely questions that you prepared, Julio. And thank you for starting off and setting it up in such a way that I seem like I'm an outlier in the whole thing. And that I might say an encouraging word at the end, because even the last few topics on backslide.
I think you have to take in the top here. Huh?
Yeah, backsliding strikes me as an odd term. I must confess.
Put it high here.
Okay. All right. Backsliding, I think, is almost part of original sin. And I'm inclined to think that it's something we won't eliminate very soon. And I think it's an important part of politics to recognize that. One of the reasons why I like liberal political thought is that it is rooted in a suspicion of government. today I looked up Federalist 51. I won't pull it out here to read it, but where James Madison says, what is government if not the greatest reflection on human nature? If men were angels, there would be no need for government. And government itself is as much in need of checking. The first task of government is to control the government, but then the second task is to control the government itself. Government itself is as big a danger as the remedy that they seek to provide. So if we take that as kind of the background, it's not too unusual for us to be confronting these problems of we could say the shortcomings of any constitutional or populist regime, that they sometimes they live up to their principles and sometimes they fail miserably. And even though the United States is the oldest functioning democracy in the world, I think everybody would agree it's far from being a perfect example of it. And so, you know, that's why I'm an optimist in the sense that I think that, although I don't like the term optimist, I'm hopeful because it's only on the basis of hope that we can move forward. You know, there is, as Albert Camus in his famous novel, The Plague, the novel ends with, if you're not familiar with the novel is about a plague that infects a whole town called Oran in North Africa. We learn, of course, that the plague is something that is not just an odd phenomenon, but something that we all carry within us. We all have the disease of the plague, and it affects the whole town. And then after the plague has disappeared, and of course, like the pandemic, this doctor who saves as many people as he could during the thing, he looks down on the town and he says, in a time of plague, there is more to admire than to despise in men. On the basis of that, I think we can move forward and think about how we might engage one another in constructive ways. That's my fundamental. I don't think, even though I'm a political theorist, I don't think that that the stand of political thinkers or political activists should be that of argument, but that of practice, putting into practice what we preach.
Professor, but if the democracy is always in crisis and crisis is the real dynamic of democracy, some people tend to see democracy as equivalent with something that in where everything is relative. So nowadays we think that not only is important relativity or relativism for democracy, but it is essential for democracy to be absolutely open to a plural and relativistic view. In your opinion, how to face a democracy which is under trial, under judgment, under crisis permanently, and at the same time advocate the notion of truth or some truth that can nurture democracy without impose and try to build something in which we can share common values without violence or imposition under the notion of truth?
That's a great question because it gets us into the core issue, which is that we can live together only on the basis of truth. There's no common world without truth. There's no community. There's no common good without truth. Otherwise, we live in private worlds. And in private worlds, we simply go our own ways. Yet, we clearly live in a pluralist condition. One of the reasons why politics is necessary is because we do not agree on everything, or maybe on very few things. And so that suggests that truth itself is constantly in danger or has to defend itself. Now, uh, 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 um, our previous pope before this, the last one, Benedict XVI, had a wonderful phrase called the dictatorship of relativism. Although I'm a big admirer of Benedict, I don't think that was a happy phrase. Relativism is only one feature of the reality that we inhabit, and we cannot even discuss it except on the basis of truth. So embedded in every conversation is the premise of truth. Even if you're going to lie to me, you have to lie on the basis of knowing truth. This is why animals don't lie to one another, because they don't view the world in terms of truth. Only human beings dissemble and lie, and there's plenty of that in politics. But all of that is because we already know the truth in some fundamental way. And you can say, well, what is the basis for truth? Well, it is our willingness to engage in a conversation with one another, which has embedded in it a certain mutuality or openness of recognition. We recognize the equal rights and dignity of a conversation partner. That's the truth. It's as simple as that. When you begin to unpack that, you realize that yes, the person that I'm talking to has rights and a dignity that is unerasable, inalienable, and cannot be forgotten. And so we already share a truth before we begin, and we cannot even talk about truth without beginning with truth itself.
Professor, I have another question that has to do with the feeling about democracy currently. I could make this generalization and I could say that probably during the 20th century, democracy was seen as a paradise, as a goal, as something that it was a dream for many countries. In Latin America, it was like that. And democracy was a place in which everybody tried to share a common dream, where people can encounter each other in order to build a common view. But this has changed dramatically. And currently in the 21st century, democracy is not a place for encounter, but it's more like a battlefield in which everybody is fighting each other, and democracy has transformed itself in a place of contrast, controversy, and a struggle. What happened in society for this radical shift between the view of democracy as a share of dreams and a battlefield in the 21st century?
I don't think you can say that democracy was the only dream. There were many dreams in the 20th century. And I'm struck by, I mean, we've been talking this afternoon about the shift towards autocratic regimes and how they undermine institutions and all of those things. As if that's not a kind of to be expected part of the ambitions of democratic leaders in general. Populist politicians are not the only kind. No one wants to have an opposition. No one wants to be regulated and have lawyers and courts and all of those things. And in fact, all the big companies in the US and in the world want to get rid of competition as much as they can. No one wants to have to answer either to voters or customers or anybody else, and certainly not to judges. But that is the nature of the kind of regime that we inhabit, which is really the kind of conversation that arises out of our encounter with one another. Now, what is what can we say about that that sheds an illumination on things? It is that we already, are engaged in this, building responsibility for building a common world together, and we already know something about it before we begin. There's a big difference, however, between, I mentioned the problem about truth and lies. There's a big difference between populist political figures and figures who encourage organized crime and who wink at all kinds of racist and unpleasant and unsavory things. And leaders who are convinced that they carry an ideological message of universal emancipation. We have come through the 20th century, through the movements of great ideological ambition. The ideological movements that were discredited eventually as a result of the worst experiences of the 20th century are nowhere near the kind of challenges that we're looking at today. That's why I have a more sober and hopeful outlook on things, that I don't think that, because you see, in order to do wrong, in order to lie, in order to get away with evil doing, you have to think you're doing good. Macbeth, Shakespeare's Macbeth, was eaten up by the awareness of what he had done to usurp power. And eventually he couldn't stand it. The great ideological figures sleep well at night because they're convinced that history was on their side. Nothing that they could do was wrong or impossible. Now that's where the challenge of truth comes in. How do you dislodge that kind of airtight justification or rationale for evil? I'm not sure that the challenges that we're confronting are quite at that level. They're close, but they're not quite there.
Professor, I would like to, if you have to tell in an assembly, for example, in a parliament, what would be the most strong arguments to defend that human rights, for example, and human dignity are previous from government and previous from the state?
Yes, that's how you regain truth. We regain the truth about ourselves and our condition and our relations to one another when we look one another in the eye and realize that you too are a person with inwardness and a sense of mutuality, awareness that I cannot simply erase. That's why it's impossible for me to kill you. I can only kill you if I no longer see you as a person. And when we do military training, we try to get people to forget about that. But the truth is that the awareness of human dignity and of human rights is elementary. Yes, it does come from the idea that we are made in the image of God. That St. Thomas Aquinas said that even though he's not a big theorist of human rights or of human dignity. He did say that personal reality is the highest reality in being. And we are persons because we are like God. We are made in the image of God as persons. And that's something that you don't actually have to be a Christian or a reader of Scripture to discover. You discover it right away in a personal encounter.
I would like to move now to the relationship between democracy and technology.
Yeah.
Technology brings the promise that we're going to be free, that we're going to have a kind of domain of reality. But at the same time, there is a fear about technology and how could dismantle or abolish democracy. What is your view about this new era of a profound relationship between democracy and technology?
Yeah, great question. Usually, what you're thinking about there are social media, AI, computer-driven things, digital technology of all types. When you and you know, we think about the reign of technology, technology and computers and robots and everything will take over everything. Obviously, that's a huge temptation. It's both a huge instrument. It's something that has potential benefits, but it's also something that has dangers because we can see the reign of technology as eliminating the personal, the unique, and everything that is of value in human life. Now, are we going to lose ourselves in that? There's a good chance. You know, I have a 17-year-old granddaughter who's living with us at the moment, and she spends an inordinate amount of time flipping through her cell phone. And it's depressing, I can tell you that. I think, oh my God, there must be some point where you make a phone call to somebody real on the other end and actually talk and actually have a sense of warmth and feeling and maybe even fall in love. I think that, you know, those are the big dangers ahead for her. But yes, at some point I think technology will dissolve for her, and I hope it will for many of us.
Thank you, Professor. I would like to end with a big picture question. Um, I think that the most simpler definition of democracy is mainly as a mechanism of majorities and minorities. But I think that at the same time, you can think that this is a very poor definition of democracy. How would be the secret? How would be the elements to transform democracy not only in a mechanism, a cold mechanism of majority and minorities, but in something that is a real cultural way of life and endure democracy as a real system for the construction of the common good?
Yes, that's in many ways kind of the question that's been behind a lot of the conversation that I've been listening to today. You know, how do you deal with the decline of democracy? And it's important to begin with that, to begin with the realization that it's not democracy that declines, it's we that decline. We have to view democracy not as a technique, not as a system, not as a constitution even, but as a way of living together for which we are responsible and for which we face the future. It's very important for democracy to be understood not as a contest for power, and not as the majority crushing the minority. Although that obviously is the game. But heck, that's the purpose of every game. Football, baseball, basketball, any game you want to follow, hockey. It's all about crushing the other team. But you don't want to kill them. You want to be able to play them again. You want to be able to maintain it. And that means you want to win by the rules. You want to maintain the rules of the game. More than winning is maintaining the game itself.
Thank you, Professor Ware. With that answer, we finish our seminar today, and thank you for being until the end of the seminar, and it has been an honor and a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. And yeah, and you've definitely all earned your drink at this point.
For those of you in person, we will have a short reception out in the hallway.
Let me turn up. That's very good.